Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Press TV World News. The U.S. accuses Syrian government forces of using chemical weapons in an area occupied by terrorists in the province of Idlib. State Department spokesperson made the claim in a statement saying U.S. is still gathering information about alleged chlorine attack. The statement also warned that Washington and its allies will respond quickly if Damascus resorts to chemical attacks. The administration of U.S. President Donald Trump has twice bombed Syria over the government's alleged use of chemical arms. Damascus has flatly rejected the using of chemical weapons or the use of chemical weapons. In 2013, Syrian government agreed to destroy its chemical weapons stockpile. Russia and Syria have published evidence which they say proves terrorist groups were behind chemical attacks in the war-torn country. Joining us now out of Brisbane is Mr. Max Igan, radio host and political commentator. Hello, Mr. Igan. Thanks for joining us back on the program. Sir, your thoughts on all this?
Oh, look, it's just the same excuse that the United States uses all the time. They've used this, like you say, in 2013. They claimed it was a chemical attack. We found out later that these chemicals actually came from, I think it was Britain, those particular ones, and they were set off by mistake by the rebels that the West is funding. I mean, this is what the United States does. It creates these red lines and says, well, if they cross this red line, then we'll have to go in and bomb them. And then they always announce this just before these people coincidentally happen to cross the red line. And it's always just false reporting. I mean, this is something the United States falls back on all the time. Oh, chemical weapons, we've got to go and bomb them. They do it all the time, and there's never any chemical weapons. And yet we see the United States and Israel using these chemical weapons against the Palestinians and the Yemenis and all sorts of people all the time, but we never hear anything about that. It's just the classic excuse. You know, America says, oh, we're going to pull out of the war, we're pulling out, oh, wait, chemical weapons, we've got to go back in. It's just theatre for the masses, and they play the same card every time. It fascinates me how people continue to believe this tripe. It really does.
And what adds to the mystery here is whether you look at the Khan Sheikhoun attack back in 2017, where terrorists had only a square block left. Syrian government had them beat, and there was an alleged chemical attack, and it warranted obvious U.S. intervention. They stepped in and bombed an airbase there. And then you had that was the Khan Sheikhoun, the Duma attack, in their following year, April of 2018. Same thing. 1 or 2 square blocks left where the things were held up, and the terrorists were held up. They were beat. And then another alleged attack, and now we have the same thing. Every time the terrorists are backpedaling, it seems like they're saved by the West and their allies under the pretext or the clause of this alleged chemical attack by Damascus.
Exactly, like you say, the one in Dorma. I mean, there was talks on the table that day. There were literally hours before everyone was going to pull out and the whole war was going to be over. Oh, we'll just go and bomb our people with chemical weapons in the middle of these talks, which would have removed all of the troops from the country. I mean, it's ridiculous that people would even consider the Syrian government would do this as anything. I mean, there's no reason. The only person who can possibly benefit from these chemical attacks is those people who want to continue the conflict in Syria, and that would, of course, be the United States and Israel military-industrial complex who are running the whole show and always have been. The people who are funding and financing these so-called terrorist forces to begin with, which is simply paid mercenaries gone in to undermine a country. It's a joke. The whole thing is theatre for the masses.
Thank you, though, for joining us and for your input there out of Brisbane, Mr. Max Igan, radio host and political commentator.